My name is Dike Kalu, and I'm talking today about the evolving relationship between business leaders and tech professionals. So I know everyone here is a tech professional. A lot of people are aspiring to be tech professionals, and this is a little bit of a story about the evolution of my journey and how it has changed a lot over the last really 24 months. So, first of all, starting with a story is maybe about 12, 13 years ago, I was sitting at my desk at my job. I had just gotten promoted about 2 months earlier, and I had a set of reports that were due for a client. So this was not a tech job, this was a consultant job where I had to create a bunch of reports for clients and go present it to them, mostly in Excel, boring stuff. But given that it was boring and given that I knew how to code, I went about automating all the reports. So about 6 weeks out, I wrote a lot of code, a lot of trial and error, and finally, I had everything working. But there was a problem. Even though it was correct, didn't look anything like the reports the clients were typically given out to clients and presenting. So I had a meeting with my boss. I was nervous about 15 minutes going into it. Finally worked up the courage, went in, presented the whole thing, pushed a button. The reports for 4 or 5 of my clients just generated. We went through it. It was all perfect. But he looked at me as nice as he could. He was like, yeah, we can't use that. This was about a week out. I had about a week, 4 or 5 clients, and I had to start all over. It was almost impossible. And, this guy's like the nicest guy in the world. He was probably one of the best managers I've ever had. So I couldn't really be mad, but still, I was in a very bad spot. And I was wondering what happened. And what happened was I had created something good. I had saved some time. It would have been good if the company could have used it across the board, but I was the only one in the company that understood the work. So trust and cohesion will beat technology any day. And that was a very tough lesson to learn. One of the things that he brought up was, what if something goes wrong? Who will fix it? What if you call out sick? What if you get in a car accident? What if the plans change and there's something that we've never done before and no one else can help you? And these were all valid points. And in my youth at that time, I had an answer for everything. But really, he was right. And it took years later, when I was running my own business, for me to really understand that. And a good analogy for that is, I don't know, if ShopRite all of a sudden produced an airplane, who would volunteer to be the first person to fly it? No? I was asking a company to be the first one to fly the airplane that I created. And it just wouldn't work. And that's an important lesson for a lot of the folks here who are also getting started in your career to learn. So, fast forward into very recently, I had another client. I run a software development firm. We build projects for companies here in Nigeria and startups in the US. Had another client, potential client, who came to me and they were like, hey, we're having a hard time tracking our campaigns, our marketing campaigns. And I spent about 4 to 5 calls with them, trying to understand the problem, trying to maybe find a solution for them. And I'm thinking, all right, we're about to make a sale. Money's about to come in. And then they called me back and they said, well, actually, me and someone on my team started playing around with ChatGPT. We figured it out. We didn't go all the way, but we don't need you anymore. And, variations of that story has happened once or twice over the last few months. You're seeing a lot of people before who were not tech experts now not only trying to do things themselves because they have help and support, they're actually succeeding, and then even more importantly, they're now being encouraged to attempt more things in technology. So that really brings to thought, like, what are some of the habits, what are some of the ways that we work that will have to change in a world where the people on the other side of the table, the business folks, for lack of a better word, know more about technology than they used to. And that is a good thing, by the way. So in the old days, the way it works is give me the requirements and I will build what you want. I'm sure some people in jobs now have had the situation where you're asking, hey, what are the requirements? What are the requirements? Or maybe the code doesn't work and all your tests pass, and you're like, hey, but I coded it against the requirements and the test passes. And that's really not acceptable anymore. I think a great story about this is one of my first consulting gigs. I was working for a company that was doing a big transformation. I was one of the many engineers there, and they had spent millions of dollars. They have spent lots of sleepless nights, and this integration would just not finish. And over time, you can kind of see the team getting demoralized. You can see, people start questioning, like, can we actually get this done? And what it took to turn it around was someone sitting down, putting a list of all the people who are involved, and just calling them. And I was sitting there, this person was very junior in the team, but she took it upon herself to just call the people that we were all working with and ask them, like, hey, what do you need? Hey, what do you need? Hey, what do you need? And over time, she shared that information back to the team. And we all now had like a good understanding and empathy for people on the other side. Before that, the developers were fighting with the database team because, they're doing this and we want that. And then the legacy SAP folks, it was just a lot of infighting. And after she did that, we were able to kind of build some compassion and understanding of the whole project. And things really started moving after that. And it is much more important in kind of like in the era that we are now to be able to do that. So really, that's the dichotomy that existed. There was the tech whiz, which everyone here is aspiring to be. You want to know how to write the fastest algorithms. You want to know how to pick the right framework to write clean code, tested code. You want to become an expert, and that is great. But to add to that, we're usually writing code to solve a problem. And if you are working in a business, you have to know what that problem is. And one other thing is we got to realize that we have ChatGPT too. We have AI tools as well. So before we can kind of throw our hands up and say, hey, I need the requirements. Tell me what you want, and I build it. But now we can actually go and ask an AI tool, like, hey, what does this mean? What does the business really mean? What is a ledger? What is whatever your space you're working in, you have the tools to understand more about the underlying business, and you have a responsibility now to do that. I think a great story for that is, you know, I'm not terribly old. I'm younger than I look. But when I first got into tech, I got into a position, and they hired someone who was a lot younger than me, right? Much younger. Did not. I don't even think he went to university, but it was clear within 2 weeks that this person knew way more than all of us put together on the team. And gladly on that team, we all just kind of dropped our ego and handed over the keys to him. And he just showed us how things worked, right? And what the problem then was there were a lot of tools that existed that we weren't utilizing as a team. And in a way, I learned during that period that that's just irresponsible. If you have things that can make you deliver better work, make you understand what you're doing better, and it's accessible to you, you have to use it if it it improves the output that you can deliver. So, how do you kind of go about that? If all you've been heads down in software, you haven't really gotten access to maybe the people who are underground building the business. You've more or less been used to getting some software requirements and then building it, get your tests to pass, get it to build, get it through QA, get it deployed, and then that's it. You wait for the next sprint. Some of the things you need to do is just know how the company operates. So the first thing is know what your company does and who its customers are, which sounds very basic, but I have consulted in some companies where the developer does not know how the company makes money. And if I'm being honest, I've been in situations where I wasn't entirely sure how the company made money, but I knew what was in front of me and the work that was in front of me. So know exactly how money flows in your company and wherever you're working. Know who the customers are. Doesn't mean you need to know them by name, but at least know, like, generally they're mid-sized companies. Generally, the people we're engaging at those companies is the CEO, or they're the managers, or they're the frontline employees. Just know as much as you can about not only the people using your software, but the person that actually like decides to pay the company that you are working for. So that means knowing what people do at your company. And I'm saying this from the assumption that you guys are one day going to be developers within a company that maybe is not a software firm. For example, like you're a software developer at Ebana, for instance, or at a bank. So know all the people who are there and know what each person does. Know what other systems exist instead of just the ones that you're working on. And again, I am very guilty of that. You can drop into a company and find out that there could be 30, 40, 50 apps that are all running, and you're working on two or three of them. It is your responsibility to know at the minimum the systems that integrate or consume whatever you are building. It is probably better for you to know the second layer of systems that are integrating with those that are integrated with your system. Know what people do, know what their roles are, know what systems they're doing. And at the end of the day, take it upon yourself to make sure that everything you do, every code you write, everything your code does, that the data that is generated gets out of your operational databases and gets to some data warehouse where the company aggregates all their data. If they don't have that, be the hero that builds it for them, right? Have a place where all the data for all the company is aggregated, because especially in the era that we're going into, data is gold. Data is the new oil, like you've heard a lot of people say. And a lot of times, I've been on a lot of sales calls. It just didn't work out, or there wasn't alignment. And usually, what happens is, hey, we want to use AI. Okay, you want to use AI for what? We want to solve this problem. Okay, where's your data for that problem? And we kind of go through discussions, talk to your tech team, and weeks later we find out like, hey, they're not even storing that, or maybe they're storing it and it gets written over whenever someone edits something, or maybe they're storing it and there's some policy to wipe the data every 10 minutes. And what we find is a lot of the things they want to do, they could do it if they had kept their data. And now they realize that, hey, we're at a disadvantage. We have all this business history, all this data that we just didn't save, and now it could be really valuable to us. So a lot of the work that we've been doing is just like getting people to, we get engaged for a tech job, but really what we're doing is we're just on calls documenting. Like, okay, so when Bola shows up and the products come, she puts it into this system, and then when it goes into that system, it goes to the PO. Like very basic things. Spending quality engineering time just documenting the basic things. Why? At the end of the day, we're all there to create some kind of value, and you got to know what that value is. It has to be recorded somewhere. And if it's not, pitch in and do it. So lastly, know what metrics move the company. And be sure that if you interact with those metrics, that you are capturing that for the rest of the company to see. So a great example of that is working at a company whose sole goal was to enroll. Let me not give away the company, but they had to enroll people into their products, into their services. And one day, someone tapped on my shoulder and was like, and I wrote the enrollment API with another engineer there, and someone tapped on my shoulder and was like, "Hey, how many enrollments did we have last week?" And I was like, "All right, let me go into the database, run a query," and immediately, maybe 20, 30 minutes later, someone else came and was like, "How many enrollments have we had today?" So 4 or 5 people asked us that same question in one day. What happened was there was a meeting with all the executives, and in that meeting, they realized like no one really knows what's happening. At the end of the month, they get the reports, they see what flows through, but real time, no one knew, and enrollments was like a big focus of the company. And the engineering team, we realized also that we just weren't tracking the right metrics and putting it in the right hands at the right time. And we were doing a disadvantage to the company. So know what metrics your company cares about. And if you are touching anything that affects that, make sure that you're pushing it out. So when you are done with that, now it's time to automate. Now it's time to introduce AI. Now it's time to introduce machine learning. There's a lot of back work that needs to be done before you get to the fun stuff. And even when you start working with data, the next 90% of your time is going to be stuck in pandas or polars or whatever you're using, cleaning that data. So get used to the grunt work and be comfortable picking up doing that grunt work way earlier in the process and not just when the fun part starts. So in summary, things are different now. There's a lot of talk like, hey, are we still going to need developers with the way AI is progressing? What do you guys think? Hands up if you think developers are still going to be needed. Great. I agree too. I agree too. However, our roles are going to change. I think there's going to be a lot more people who don't have the typical developer skills that you would think of as a developer who now can do things. We will kind of have to move over a little bit and become experts at non-technical things. I'm going to say that again. We're going to have to become open to become experts at non-technical things. And that means just expanding your horizons. Read a history book. Read a book on biology, right? Like figure out, there's a Python library that does anything. You can use Python to read a genome. You can use Python to do accounting. Like actually read about things that are outside of your scope, outside of your field, outside of your current knowledge base, because that knowledge in aggregate is what you're going to bring to every job, every project that you ever work on. Read a philosophy book, right? Like challenge yourself to kind of do something every month, every quarter that you wouldn't normally learn about. And one last thing before we get to questions is I see Python as a way to learn, right? Like Python is a simple language. Let me not like it's I don't want to say like it's simple in that it's easy to learn or anything. There's still effort to learning for those who are starting on that journey, but it's very rewarding because once you know Python, you can use it to just like do simple things. You can read an econ book and then like use it to model supply and demand. You can literally use it to like just integrate into many things that you do. So as you are kind of reading things, learning new things, open up your IDE, just try to create a little script from it and kind of cement that learning and keep those things, build it over the years. Because right now, if something comes up, there's probably one random script that I have in maybe my laptop 2, 3, 4 years ago that I can kind of refer to and jog my memory about something I've learned. So the clicker's not working, but there we go. So that's the end. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email's there, Twitter, and LinkedIn, or X, and also LinkedIn. Thanks, y'all.
Questions?
Are y'all letting me off easy? Question.
So you mentioned before that you kind of run teams and you have kind of a structure where you're managing people.
Yes.
How do you inform them, or how do you mentor them, or get them kind of all on the same page on taking that initiative or taking that extra step and getting that additional context? And is it everyone in the team, or is it one particular person? How do you do that?
It's a great question. And to be honest, we're struggling with that, right? Because some of my developers are here. So I'm kind of talking to you as well. Um, I think it goes two ways. Is number one, we get the developers to write the documentation before they code, right? And we try to reduce everything down to inputs, outputs, and then defining what happened, right? So the inputs is what's coming in, the outputs is what's going back, and then what's happened is what goes to the data warehouse. So in order for them to even know that and write that documentation, they have to know what the business practices are and what's going on. Where but it's a struggle though because there's deadlines, right? There's sometimes you just got to get work done and we can't go through all of that. But what I found is at the end we end up burning more time than just chilling, cooling down, and doing your documentation and understanding what you're building.
I'm up. Thank
Cool.
you.
Thanks, yo.
Thank you very much.